Hello everyone, welcome to me explaining how to play chess. I'm not going to put my face in the frame because last time I did that it just wasn't. So yeah, let's get started because it's going to be a while. So first we'll start off with the different pieces and then explaining what they do, how they work, and how to use them. So here are the different pieces. You got a pawn, you got the bishop, knight, rook, king, and queen. I'll put those more towards the center here. So those are all the different kinds of pieces, and then there are 8 pawns, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, 1 king, and 1 queen for each side. And there are white pieces and black pieces. If you know anything about chess, you'll know that. So, white pieces. We'll start off. We'll start off with the pawn. I don't know why I said white pieces. Anyway, so the pawn starts off in a row like this. So let's show the setup here. With the other pieces, I'll have the setup after I tell you how to move. But this is critical to movement of the piece. So. The pawn can move 1 space forward, and that's it. That's all it can do by default. But in order to take a piece, it must be diagonal from another piece. So it cannot be like, let's say a pawn is in front of it. It cannot take forward. It just can't do that. When 2 pawns are next to each other, it's called being frozen, because you can't you can't move forward. Another piece can't either. The only way to break this is taking by like that diagonally. So yes, it can only move 1 space forward every turn, and take diagonally. It cannot take forward. I've seen many people make that mistake, and I get it. It can only move forward, so therefore it should only take forward. When you take a piece, and this goes for any piece, you go to where the piece was taken. So like if I was going to take this piece, you take this piece off and you put your piece where that piece was. And any piece can take any other piece. It doesn't matter what piece takes what. So yeah, and now the reason I set it up like this is because the first turn with a pawn, so start wherever it starts in this row, it can move 2 spaces forward. You don't have to, you can move it just 1 space forward, but it can move 2 spaces forward. And that only goes for the first turn. So if it hasn't moved yet, it can do that. Every other time, it's just 1 space. And if you get a pawn all the way to the end, you can either put it on its side or replace it with a queen. Putting it on its side is just if you have your queen on the board already, but it becomes a queen, basically. And I'll explain how queens move and everything, but this is basically a queen now. So yeah, those are the pawns. So next I'm going to be talking about the rook. So the rook is a piece that can only move horizontally or vertically. So if it and this can move as many spaces as the player wants it to. So it doesn't have to move 1 space each turn. It can move as many spaces in 1 turn. But once you're going in a direction, you can only go in that direction. So you can't do something like that. It has to be just 1 direction, like the band. 1 direction, and then that's it. And once you stop moving the piece, that's your turn. There are things where there are types of chess where once you move a piece, you have to leave it there and your turn's over. Or once you touch a piece, you have to move that piece, and once you let go, your turn is over. I don't really play like that, so if you wanted to move it here, and if you wanted to move it in 1 space, but you're like, oh wait, that doesn't work, you can move it back and then move it somewhere else. So like it's like you never did anything on your turn. Now, you might be asking, well, how does it take pieces? Well, it can take pieces to wherever it can move. So let's say a pawn was here or here. It can move to where that piece is and replace it. And that also goes for, any direction, or even if it's just like here. But once it hits a piece, it stops. It has to stop. So if a piece wasn't here, it can keep going. But if a piece is in the way and it has to be taken, it stops where the piece is. It cannot keep going after the piece is taken. That goes with everything. That goes with every piece. But because the pawn can only move one space, and the rook can move as many as it wants, I felt like that needed to be clarified. So, the special replacing piece thing only applies to pawns, and the only reason that is a thing is because getting pawns to the other side of the board is way harder than it looks. And then I might explain why. So, yeah, it can go anywhere like that, and once it is moved and stopped, that's the turn. And they go right at the back corners. The rooks go at the back corners of the board like that. Next, we have the bishop. And the bishop is basically exactly like the rook, except it can only move diagonally. Diagonally means it can go in a line diagonally across the board. So it also is the exact same. So like, let's say there was a piece here. I wanted to take it. I move to where that piece is and replace it. And same goes for going through pieces. You just can't do that. You have to stop where the piece is. So, I don't know why I took it off. But it has to also stay on its color, so it cannot change color. It can only move diagonally, not horizontally or vertically. There are two, and they are on opposite colors, so you do have a chance to take different pieces that are in different colors. And they go right here and here, and this is where the king and queen are, but I'll get to that in a moment. So let's talk about the king. The king is kind of like a combination of... Well, actually, you know what? No, let's talk about the queen. So the queen is a combination of the rook and the bishop. So it can move as many spaces as you want it to in horizontal or vertical, and also it can do diagonal. And the cool thing about it is if you move to, let's say, if you're on a black space, you want to move diagonally, you can do that. But if you move to a white space, and then it's your turn again, you can move diagonally on the white. Now, you cannot, like I said, you cannot change direction, and that goes for going from horizontal vertical to diagonal. You cannot go like that. Think about it as like being either a rook or a bishop, depending on the turn. So if I was moving horizontally or vertically during that turn, it is like a rook. And if I'm moving diagonally on that turn, it's like a bishop. And it's the same thing for taking pieces, or threatening pieces, like, oh look, this is in the way, so I can take that. But it can do something like, it can move here to take that piece. It can take that piece. It can take that piece. It can take this piece. And it's the same thing. You move to where it is and replace it and stay there. And you can't move through pieces. And then this goes, and then the queen goes right here. And it goes on its color, but I'll explain that in a second. So, next is the king. The king is the most crucial piece in the entire game. And you might be asking, well, why aren't you talking about it last? Well, the last piece is a little weird. But anyway, the king is the most crucial piece. This is what decides whether you win or lose the game. You win the game, you win the game if the king has nowhere to go where it cannot be taken. So let's say I have a rook here and my bishop here and a queen here. So that's a terrible example. Let's say I have the king is like here, my rook is here, and my queen is here. So it cannot move anywhere, and it can also move one space. I should probably tell you that. So it is exactly like the queen, except it can only move one space. So it can take anything that's directly next to it in like a 9 or a 3x3 grid. So there's 8 different spaces it can move in any place, unless it's like next to the end of the board. But that's pretty obvious. But anyway, yes, it can only move one space. It goes right here next to the queen. But anyway, back to winning the game. If you win the game, you checkmate the other player. So in this case, this is one of the best ways to win, and one of the ways I actually it's my goal to win like this because it's the easiest to remember and the most effective in my opinion. Anyway, so it cannot move out of check, and check is when the king is threatened to be taken by a piece from the opposite player. So it cannot move out of check, which means it can be taken wherever it moves, and if that's the case, then the player that is in check loses. Another example of this would be like, let's say the rook is there, and you have a bishop here. No, bishop there. It still doesn't work. Never mind. Let's see. Well, like this, maybe. So, it can't move. No, I could move there. Never mind. I was trying to show you other examples of checkmate, but basically, if it can't move anywhere where it can't be taken, checkmate, that player loses. So, yeah, last piece, let me put them back to where they were. Last piece is the knight. The knight is probably the hardest piece to understand next to, like, the pawn. I know, pawn being the simplest piece, but having the second most rules aside from the knight. So the knight is an interesting piece because it moves in a really weird way. And let me just show you. That's how it moves. So what I did there is basically the knight moves in an L shape or a 2-1 kind of way. So basically it moves it moves 2 spaces in horizontal or vertical direction, and then 1 space in the opposite direction. And by opposite, I don't mean back or forward. I mean left or right. So a better way to explain that, I guess, is if you go to horizontal, then you go 1 vertical. If you go to vertical, you go 1 horizontal. So if you're just starting off, then just go 1, 2, and then over 1. That's the way I tried to explain it to people, and yeah, that's the best way to practice it, is to just count it out and understand it like that. So it does not go 1, 2, and 3. It does not go 1, 2, 3, and it has to move 3 spaces. It cannot stop. Like other pieces that can move multiple spaces, you can stop it wherever you want. Like the rook, if I wanted to stop here, I just go like that. If I wanted to stop here, I just go over like that. This has to move 3 spaces, so it has to go 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3. But if you're just learning it, don't worry about like the 1, 2, the 1, and then 1, 2. Just go 1, 2, and 3. And after a while of using the knight, you kind of just see where it can move. And that's the whole thing with planning ahead and being a chess player, is you just know where it can go. But just remember, 2 in a horizontal direction, that means 1 in a vertical direction. If it's 2 in a vertical direction, it's 1 in a horizontal direction. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. And they go right in the last spaces right there. So, actually, one last thing with the knights. So I kept talking about how you can't go through pieces. That still stays true with the knight. However, it can jump over pieces. So let's say a rook was here and it needed to get here. What you would do is you have one turn to take the piece, another turn to go here, and then another turn to go there. So that's 1, 2, 3 turns. A knight does this all in one turn. So if it's right here, you go 1, 2, and 3. Or 1, 2, and 3. Or 1, 2, 3. Whatever. It can jump like that. It also takes a piece wherever it lands. So let's say I was here. I cannot go 1, 2, 3, and then take. It has to always stay the same movement. So 1, 2, and 3. If I move here, I just take this piece off. So yeah, it can jump. It can also jump as many times as it wants. So if I wanted to take this piece, I would go... Well, if I was doing the 1 and then 1, 2, it would be 1, 1, 2. But just remember the 1, 2, and 3. Let's see. A better way to explain that would be like if it was like this. I don't know if you had... Let's say like that. And I wanted to take this piece. I'd go 1, 2, and 3. And then it replaces that just like that. And it's the only piece that can jump pieces or... well, I can't go through. No piece can go through another piece. So that is the basic movement of every piece. Now, there's one last thing, and that is with the king and the rook. They have a weird relationship with each other in that they can do what's called castling. So castling is where if there are two spaces, vertical or horizontal, between the king and the rook, not diagonal, right? Just horizontal or vertical. The king, or actually, the rook moves over to right next to the king, and then the king hops over it to the space next to it. So it doesn't mean it goes horizontally, or it doesn't mean it goes any other direction, whether that be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. It hops over like that. From the direction it came from. So if it comes from this direction, hops in that direction. If it comes from this direction, it hops in that direction. And that's what castling is. And that can be useful for, like, let's say you're starting like here, and you have your bishop out here and your knight out here, and you want to put the king into the corner so that it will be safer. So what you do is you move the rook over, and the king hops. That's one turn. I also should mention that that is one turn. That is not 2 turns or anything weird like that. It is just one turn. This is all one motion, one turn. So if anybody says, hey, that's 2 turns, tell them, no, it's castling. They might not know what castling is, so you might have to explain it to them, but that is what castling is. It can also be used to get out of like sticky situations. Let's say you have a queen right here and a rook right here. So obviously, well, actually, let me up the stakes here. Also, the king can't take a piece if it. I should also mention that, yeah. So the king can't take a piece if that piece is protected by another piece, and protecting is basically like if you take this piece, I'll take your piece. So it can't move into danger. It can only move out of danger or into a space that isn't dangerous at all. So anyway, let's say you're in this kind of position. You have like a knight here or something. I don't know. You are like, well, actually, no, that wouldn't work. Like there. So you're completely in check here, and it looks like you're in checkmate. Because that, you can't move here, you can't move here, you can't move here. Actually, let me explain why you can't move in places. So you're in check right now because this queen could take the king. So you can't move here because either the knight takes you or the rook takes you. You can't move forward because either this rook takes you or the queen takes you. You can't move backwards because the queen would still take you. You can't move to the side because the knight is right here. You can't move diagonally because, you know, the queen is right there. You can't take this rook because the queen would take the king. Can't move here because of the rook, and so on and so forth. Actually, this space... Oh, no. The rook's still there. So no space in this 3x3 grid is safe. Well, thanks to castling, it can be. Never mind, it can't be. Yeah, if it was like right here. So this would still be checkmate, normally. But because of the castling, you can move the rook over here, and then the king over there, and it's still in check. Dang it. I'm just trying to figure out how this would actually work. So yeah, this would work. So, so you would move the rook over, hop it with the king, and bada bing, bada boom, you're no longer in check. So it can be used to even get out of check. That was a way too long explanation of how that can be used. But anyway, that is all the movement of all the pieces. Black pieces are exactly the same as the white pieces, except for one thing. Like I mentioned before, queen goes on its color, and what that means is if you see over here, I'm setting this up, if you see over here, you have the queen is on the white space next to the king, right here. So the king goes on the black space, the white king goes on black space, and then the white queen goes on the white space. And for the black pieces, it is the black queen goes on the black space. I think I read that somewhere after a lot of people were asking, or we were trying to figure out, you know, where does the queen and king go? Because, you know, every other piece is pretty straightforward, but the king and queen were always like, well, what do we do with them? So then we just agreed that queen goes on its color. So that is the basic movement and basic rules of chess. And in the next video, I will explain how to actually play chess properly. But yeah, so now you sort of kind of maybe know how to play chess. If you still have any questions or I left something out, please leave it in the comments below. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.